Welcome to another episode of the View from the Bridge podcast, the Chelsea podcast from Football.London. I'm Scott Trotter, and today I'm joined once again by Bobby Vincent. How are you doing, Bobby?
I'm good, Scott. How are you, mate?
Yeah, not too bad. It's been another exciting week for Chelsea Football Club. The Premier League has started. They've signed players. They've seen players leave. It's been a busy few days, and I bet you're struggling to stay awake, Bobby.
Yeah, it's definitely been a busy few days. The actual football's almost taken a step back of all the transfer drama, which I'm sure we'll get into in a second.
Yeah, Chelsea versus Liverpool. And I guess ultimately Chelsea won. They have signed Moises Caicedo for a 100 million fee that could rise to 115 million with add-ons. I think the club expect that they'll end up paying a similar fee to Enzo Fernandez, with half of those add-ons deemed easily achievable. A massive signing for Chelsea. They have fulfilled that defensive midfield role to allow Enzo Fernandez some freedom after, I guess, weeks and months of trying now. It's one that we sort of expected to go on to deadline day until Liverpool threw a spanner in the works late last week and had a bid accepted for Caicedo. But the midfielder ultimately decided he wanted to join Chelsea, and that kind of put an end to Liverpool's chances in the transfer market for Caicedo. Massive signing, I guess. Arguably, maybe a fee that is too big. I guess just your reaction to that signing and just how big a deal of it is for Chelsea.
Yeah, it's a massive deal, Scott. Yeah, I think Liverpool have done us a favour, really, in terms of it not dragging on anymore, because I think it was one destined for the final days of the transfer window. Yeah, it's just one that's been going on for months, but it seems even longer than that, really, because we've known for a while that Chelsea have liked Caicedo. There was interest in January, but of course they were almost, I guess, focusing on Enzo Fernandez back then, and they eventually got that done on deadline day. And then it was always sort of their plan to invest in the midfield again in the summer. And Caicedo told Brighton that he wanted to leave the club. He supposedly had a promise from some very senior officials at Brighton that he would be allowed to go if they got the right price. And yeah, when we anticipated it, we knew that Brighton would be themselves be a very tough club to negotiate with, but it's completely understandable. I mean, what Brighton have done in recent windows to sell some of their best players, they've done some fantastic business, and it's a really well run club. So massive respect to them. And I think out of all of this mad transfer saga, Brighton are the only party really that come out looking really good, because you've got Chelsea, who I think their first bid was around £60 million, and it's almost ended up being double that. So there was always the Brighton asking for £100 million and Chelsea haggling their way towards it, and eventually sort of rising by 5 to 10 million each time with their bids. And then when Liverpool came in and agreed a fee with Brighton for about 110, 111 million pounds or whatever it was, it was, despair for Chelsea fans. They thought they'd lost out, and they're very critical of how the club handled their business and how they ultimately weren't paying what was asked for Caicedo and looked like they're going to miss out on him. But thankfully for Chelsea fans, Caicedo only wanted them. I think that picture of him with his mum from a few years ago in Ecuador, that obviously it was the announcement video in the end, that shows how much he's loved Chelsea for a while, and it looks like it's his dream move. And watching his interview yesterday with the club, you can tell how ecstatic he is. And I think with a lot of players who sign, they have to say these things, but with Caicedo, it genuinely feels like the love for the club is there. And the fact that he only wanted Chelsea when a club like Liverpool, a massive club, even though it's Europa League, they've got European football this season and Chelsea haven't, and he still wanted to go to Chelsea. So I guess that shows what an exciting project Chelsea have going on at the moment under Mauricio Pochettino, and it shows that Chelsea still have that pool. We've seen it with Enzo Fernandez, Moises Caicedo, and there's another player we will talk about in a bit. But yeah, it's a huge deal, the biggest deal of the transfer window for Chelsea, definitely so far, maybe the biggest of the window. So there with Declan Rice in terms of money. But yeah, I'm just excited now to finally see him in that blue shirt, and hopefully this weekend.
Yeah, and I guess as you mentioned, there certainly seems a Chelsea connection and a certain, whether love's too strong, depending on how cynical you are about the whole thing. But he mentioned about Claude Makelele watching compilations of him as he was growing up, described himself as a Chelsea fan. N'Golo Kante was one of his heroes. There's a great picture of him holding up, I think it's an Independiente de Valle shirt, the team he used to play for, and it's got Caicedo's name on the bottom and Kante's name going across the top. So there's certainly, an investment in Chelsea from Caicedo. And, even if you do want to be cynical about what salary may be paid or anything, this is a guy who's the youngest of 10 siblings. He's kind of probably changing his life with this move. I guess it would be understandable if he was appreciative to the club, and obviously his entourage and Chelsea have been the club they want to move to. And I think, as you know, he is somebody who is for the future on an 8-year deal that he's got, but he is very much for the now and very much something to get excited about, even if you do, again, as you noted, see Chelsea as a bit of a loser in this deal because of the vast sum they've paid, and Liverpool obviously a loser in not landing the player, and as you said, Brighton the big winners. This is something that could really help Chelsea progress, and we'll talk about Liverpool more in depth later on, but we saw a hint of how good Enzo Fernandez can be when he was released into that more advanced position, and that combination is something for Chelsea fans to really get excited about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having someone like Caicedo as well, no disrespect to Conor Gallagher, who played well on Sunday, but having someone of Caicedo's ability behind him will get even more out of Fernandez. He'll trust even more. Like some instances, maybe he was a bit cautious to go forward on Sunday just because of, having someone like Gallagher who's not a natural deep line midfielder. He maybe felt like he had to stay back a bit, but having someone like Caicedo who can cover ground in a way that, we've seen N'Golo Kante do for Chelsea over the years. He's very much of that ilk, the way he can just sort of be in more than one place at one time. He's very quick, low center of gravity as well, so he's very good on the ball. I think, honestly, on paper, I think it looks like the perfect matchup. Obviously, we will see, but there's massive hopes for this. And as a Chelsea fan who've seen their midfield almost forgotten about the centre of midfield in transfer windows gone by, I know a lot of Chelsea fans have been calling for a proper defensive mid for absolute years now. And to get someone like Caicedo, again, like what you said about overpaying, I'm a big believer. If you're a Chelsea fan, it doesn't matter about what the fee. It's not your money. It's what the club do with it. And that's for Todd Bowley and Badal Eghbali to worry about, and everyone up there. If you're a Chelsea fan, you've got him for £150 million. So be it. He's a potentially world-class player, if not already. And yeah, he's going to improve this Chelsea team no end. That absolutely no doubt about it. I think someone who's already proven it in the Premier League, albeit hasn't been doing it for years. I think he's only picked up 40 odd appearances for Brighton, but by all means, that's a terrific player. And yeah, I'm really excited to see him and Enzo Fernandez, and the likes of Andre Santos learning from both of them. Even though Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez are so young, they're such good players that someone like someone like Andre Santos, who's only a couple of years younger, can definitely learn a thing or two from them.
Yeah, and I think the other interesting kind of element to this, and of course there's still another midfielder to talk about pretty soon, but Chelsea, at least with two of those midfielders now, have a midfield that's going to be valued in excess of £200 million. They've spent more than £800 million in the opening, 14 months of the new ownership. This is obviously a project, something where Chelsea do want to create some kind of sustainable success. And I think maybe we've done our predictions before. I think I've said that, maybe Chelsea can finish 5th. There's hope they can challenge at the very top. Maurizio Pochettino is obviously on a 2-year deal. He said the only option at Chelsea is to win now. He's been very adamant about that. He's not wanting to give his squad any excuses in terms of what they can achieve, whether that be via injuries picked up to people like Christopher Nkunku or the situation they found themselves in at the start of the summer. But, there are good teams out there, Manchester City, Arsenal. Is there more pressure on Chelsea to succeed and for Pochettino to deliver something, relatively quickly now?
I think so. I think a couple of pundits have made this point, Jamie Carragher namely, about Chelsea sort of having to win now. It's a bit of a weird one because all of these players they're bringing in are still very young players, and like Caicedo is 21, Romeo Lavia, who we'll talk about, is 19. These are still very young players, and I don't think it's one where they're going to come together and gel straight away, even though there might be some pressure for them to do that. I do think it will take its time, but I think when you look at the money Chelsea have spent over the last 14 months, like you said, I think there's got to be some pressure on them because it is crazy money. It's money we've never seen before. And by all means, Todd Bowley looks like he's been smart with it in terms of getting around FFP. But I do, yes. I do think it creates pressure on Chelsea, and it's one that Pochettino will know about for sure. And I do think even if this vast amount of money wasn't spent, I think Pochettino is a winner. I think he's someone who always looks to get his team to the very top of the division in whatever way he can. So I think it is going to be a difficult one for him to manage. But as I think we spoke about on our pod a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, about what would be a success for Chelsea. And I still believe it will be top 4 this year. I think that's about the ceiling Chelsea have this season, because you look at the likes of Manchester City, looked very good against Burnley without actually playing, to the best of their abilities. You look at Arsenal, looked impressed at times against Forest, and other teams in the league as well. I don't think Chelsea are at that level yet. So I do think if you can get top 4 and potentially win a domestic trophy, the FA Cup or a Carabao Cup, or at least get far in them and allow other players to play in those cups as well, I think that's a success for Pochettino, because it is his first season and it's a completely new look squad. If you look at this squad, look at the squad now compared to what we ended last season with, it's unrecognisable almost. So it's another transitional period of Chelsea, but these transitional periods need to stop now. This is as far as this needs to be the last one for ages, because we've had too many of these in the last few years. There needs to be more stability at the club, and I think next season was when the pressure really starts on Pochettino and Chelsea.
Yeah, and maybe that pressure will start ratcheting up in the coming days as we see another big transfer fee spent on another young midfielder. Romeo Lavia is set to join the club as Chelsea, I guess, once again beat Liverpool to a player. I think somebody who maybe seemed set for Liverpool at one stage this summer, but he's, I think, maybe having his medical in the coming hours, days at Chelsea. They've had a long-standing interest in the player who joined Southampton. I think there was an offer made last summer, even after he joined Southampton, which would have been quite the achievement to sign a player in that way. I think he played very well against Chelsea early on in that season at St Mary's as well. And there's obviously a relationship with Joe Shields there, who's kind of moved with Lavia between Man City, Southampton, and he's obviously moved on to Chelsea already a long time ago, and there's a relationship there. It's like what's the latest on that, Bobby, and what do you make of another central midfielder joining?
Yeah, by all means, it looks done pretty much. He had to choose between Chelsea and Liverpool, like Caicedo did, and chose Chelsea. Fortunately for Chelsea fans, and yeah, from what I'm told, that's a lot to do with Joe Shields. I think Shields brought him in at Southampton because he was head of recruitment there, and built a very strong relationship with Lavia during their time down on the South Coast. And you're right, Scott. It did look like he was set for Liverpool. I think Liverpool were, despite Chelsea having an interest, and they actually initially opened talks in the start of June. Chelsea did, but nothing sort of progressed. They opened initial talks with Southampton just to see how they felt about the player, and Southampton were willing to sell as long as their 50 million valuation was met. And Liverpool knew that as well, and Liverpool had 3 bids, I think, all rejected initially. I think the highest was 46, and then last week Chelsea just sort of came out of nowhere and bid 48 million, which was 2 million below Southampton's valuation. That was quite quickly rejected, and a lot of people were thinking, "Oh, have Chelsea moved on from Caicedo now?" But then followed like the crazy day that was Thursday, I think, when all of the Caicedo to Liverpool stuff was happening and Lavia stuff. So we weren't really sure.
Tyler Adams was coming to Chelsea.
Yeah, Tyler Adams, I completely forgot about him. Yeah, got to feel sorry for Tyler Adams in this situation, really. Now looks like he's off to Bournemouth, so good luck to him there. Yeah, so Liverpool had the chance to sign Lavia, and didn't look like Chelsea were going to do anything about it if Liverpool had agreed the fee, but then Chelsea decided to, and I think by all accounts that was pushed forward by Joe Shields, and I know that he was very prominent in negotiations with the player, and he ultimately made his decision yesterday. So that's Monday. We're recording this on a Tuesday. He chose Chelsea, and from then, Chelsea, all they had to do was agree the deal with Southampton, and Chelsea were happy to do that. And yeah, it looks like another midfield of Chelsea, and I think it's great. It's going to be a great signing because he's won at 19 years old, even younger than Caicedo and less proven to an extent. And I think the fact that Caicedo is signing as well makes a lot more sense, because if Lavia had to come into the team and do it straight away, and he was, the sort of main man, then that could have been unnecessary pressure for him and for a teenager. But the fact that they've got Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez, and they can sort of ease Lavia in however they want to use him, it might mean they change to a 3-man midfield. That's probably another conversation for another time. But the fact they don't have to use him and rely on him straight away, I think is great. And yeah, really exciting talent. One that I know Man City were also keeping a close eye on because they had that buyback clause next summer, but that will no longer be active when Chelsea do sign him, although I think Man City get quite a bit of money for from a sell-on clause. But yeah, another exciting signing.
Yeah, and it will be interesting to see how this midfield does develop. There's all of a sudden a lot of central midfielders at Chelsea. We've got Caicedo, Enzo Fernandez, Andres Santos we've mentioned, obviously Ugachukwu, who made his debut this weekend. I guess there's a possibility for him to go out on loan. There's still Conor Gallagher there. His future is still be resolved. So it's certainly a lot still to pan out in the next just over 2 weeks of this transfer window. And I think things could still move in a lot of directions. But maybe by West Ham, we start to get to see some indication of how Mauricio Pochettino's plans formation-wise pan out, who could be involved, who is included in that squad this weekend. So certainly one to watch out for, but we best keep things moving. And, another deal done on Monday before all the jubilation of Moises Caicedo's announcement was Kepa Arrizabalaga. He joined Real Madrid on loan for the season. On Friday, Pochettino noted that he was ahead of Sanchez in Chelsea's quest to establish a number one goalkeeper. 48 hours later, he wasn't in the squad at all. Pochettino had a conversation on Saturday where they decided that the kind of player not committed to the club wouldn't be involved in the squad, and things moved quite quickly in terms of establishing that loan to Real Madrid, as Kepa was afforded the opportunity to consider his possibilities. I think Bayern Munich also was said to be interested in him. I think one that maybe 6 weeks ago would have seemed a very easy and obvious deal to do to get his wages off the books. We don't believe there's any, or we've not been informed of any kind of clause for Real Madrid to be obligated to take him on next year. He has 2 years remaining on his contract at the minute. I will say, as we've been recording, I think he's been presented in Madrid this lunchtime, and I think he's already said, I hope that with my performances, Real Madrid will decide to keep me after the loan. And I think that's probably going to go a long way in deciding how successful that is. If they do find a new home for Kepa, that'll be massive and something they've struggled to do for a long, long time. And they have wanted a new number one. There's obviously been no kind of reassurance for him that he is that position long-term at Chelsea, because he hasn't been offered any kind of new contracts, despite Edouard Mendy leaving. I think the only concern for me with this deal is that Chelsea, for the last, maybe not quite 6 weeks, I think he was on international duty, but have prepared with the idea that he would enter the season as number one. He's kind of been learning the ways of Tony Jimenez and Pochettino's plans for playing out from the back. And now we're left in just a little bit of an uncertain position of who's Chelsea's number one option will be. Will they go and spend big this summer? Is Sanchez going to take that role? And I think, I don't know, it just feels like one of those unnecessary complications for the season. How do you feel about it, Bobby?
Yeah, it's one that happened very quickly. Like you said, it's something that Chelsea were sort of open to at least all summer, but didn't have anything until recently. Obviously, Thibaut Courtois did his ACL, so it was a very sort of desperate move by Real Madrid, I guess, and one that didn't really involve too much risk. They take him on loan with no obligation to buy or whatever. He obviously has a real big chance now at Real. He obviously did really well in Spain before with Bilbao. Hasn't quite worked out for him in England, so good luck to him at Real. Hopefully, you can sort of rekindle the form that saw Chelsea spend ludicrous money on him. But it's going to be very hard for him to convince Real, because they've obviously got, when Courtois does come back, he's obviously a world-class goalkeeper, and I don't think Real Madrid would really be willing to pay the wages of Kepa for him to be number two. So it's one I can't really see happening, but good luck to him. And it is a weird one for Chelsea, because obviously all the stuff you mentioned about him training all pre-season and planning to go in the season with him as number one. Also the fact that I think his contract's up in 2025, so by the time he returns, he'll have 12 months left on his deal, and it's going to be hard for Chelsea to ship him off, like we've known for years, because of his high wages. I think I saw a figure the other day. I don't know how true it is, but he's on almost 200 grand a week, which is a lot of money. And it's going to be difficult, and it'll be even more difficult really with 12 months left in this deal, unless Chelsea are willing to accept a really sort of low price for him. And Kepa's willing to take a significant cut on his wages at another club. So it's one that I could definitely see by the time 2025 comes around, him leaving on a free transfer, because I don't think Chelsea would really want to negotiate those sort of terms again with Kepa, especially considering he's proven himself. And it's interesting. Robert Sanchez very much looked like a backup goalkeeper. Whether or not Chelsea going at now in the market, it's quite a limited market in terms of goalkeepers who are willing to leave. Like Chelsea have looked at Mike Maignan from AC Milan, but I think he's quite settled there, and he also wants Champions League football. So I think that's a no-go, and Milan would want stupid money for him, because he's one of the top properties in the goalkeeper market right now. They've looked at that Valencia goalkeeper as well, whose name I'm not even going to bother trying to pronounce. But I think you all know who I mean. And he's one they've looked at, but again, he would be very expensive. He'd probably be more open to a move, being young and wanting to prove himself, and obviously being at Valencia, who I don't think have been doing that well really in recent seasons. So, I think it's one where it's going to be hard for Chelsea to get their top targets, especially now with 2 and a bit weeks left of the window, I think. So I could definitely see Robert Sanchez being the number one. It's hardly ideal for Chelsea, but again, I think they've known all summer. Well, they've known this year really since January. We were being told how they wanted a goalkeeper, a midfielder, and a striker way before the transfer window opened. So I don't think necessarily, obviously without knowing exactly what goes on behind the scenes, I don't think they've necessarily prepared themselves in the best way for this. Because, yeah, like I said earlier, they've always been willing to let Kepa go. So I feel like there needed to be a bit more of a plan in place if they did let him go, because, like I said, it almost got flung on them out of nowhere with Thibaut Courtois' injury. But we're not seeing much action from Chelsea in terms of going out and buying a new keeper now. So, and the fact they loaned Sannino as well, like there was a thought that, Sannino could perhaps have a role at Chelsea this season, whether that's number 2, but they've loaned him out and they've been left with, Robert Sanchez, who I don't think really is seen as a long-term number 1. Marcus Bettinelli, who's injured and not good enough to probably be a number 2. He's probably suited to a number 3 role. Then they got Lucas Bergstrom, Jamie Cumming, who could obviously go out on loan. So it is a bit uncertain at the moment. But I hope Robert Sanchez can do well. I think against Liverpool he looked fine. He didn't really have too much to do. But he looked fine, and I guess we'll see in the coming weeks what sort of keeper Chelsea have in Robert Sanchez.
Yeah, for sure. I think you probably summed that up pretty well, but I just wonder if Chelsea have given up hope of, selling Kepa in any format, and have conceded that he will leave in a free, and maybe this year is just a year of his salary off their sort of obligations. So yeah, certainly an interesting one to see. Obviously, plenty of time in the transfer window. Chelsea haven't been frightened to do business in recent seasons either. Perhaps a loans on the cards. Who knows? But we will be keeping an eye on that one in the coming weeks. And that doesn't seem like, the end of the transfer business. We've obviously seen, as you kind of mentioned, the priorities we were told. It might have even been nearly a year ago that we kind of established that, but the goalkeeper, the striker, the midfielder. Chelsea have had a goalkeeper come in. Maybe still feels like they have another one. They've got the midfielder in Moises Caicedo. Perhaps more to come in on that front. They've signed Nicholas Jackson up front and Christopher Nkunku. Still potential that there's another forward to come in, but I guess maybe the next guy on the agenda is Michael Olise. What do you know about that one so far, Bobby?
Yeah, he's someone Chelsea really like. They've wanted for a while now, they've wanted a sort of right winger who can play in the middle of the park, and Olise fits that bill. Obviously, they've looked at Kudus as well, who looked set for Brighton, but now apparently that move's not going to happen. I was reading something on that last night. And yeah, so it seems like they've moved on to Olise, and we were chatting off air about it. Crystal Palace it almost seems like they've accepted they're going to lose Olise. Roy Hodgson spoke a few weeks ago and said that it's going to be really hard to keep a player of his talent, with Manchester City and Chelsea both interested. But it looks like Man City are now looking at other players. I think Jeremy Doku is close to signing for them. He's sort of the Riyad Mahrez replacement on that right-hand side. So it looks like they've sort of moved on from Olise, which I guess gives Chelsea more of a clear run at Olise. It's not advanced yet, but I know that Chelsea have been in contact with the player and the players' representatives, and I think the feedback they got from it was quite positive. Haven't been told anything different. It would just come down to agreeing a fee with Crystal Palace, and Palace know how much money Chelsea have got, even though they have spent an awful lot already. So they'll be trying to get every penny out of Chelsea. Don't think it'll be a simple negotiation, but it's also a bit of a weird one as well, because we don't know when he's back from injury. Of course, he hurt his hamstring in June, I think, playing for France under-21s. I think there's talk of it being October where he comes back, or at least around then, late September. So I guess there's no immediate rush for Chelsea in terms of getting it done within the next week or so. They've got the rest of the window to do it, because he's not going to be available anyway. But yeah, definitely one to keep an eye on, Scott. For me, someone who obviously watches Chelsea every game, it's something I'd like to see, because I think he's a terrific player and one of those players who sort of gets you on the edge of your seat. Really direct, a proper like street footballer. A touch of that Brazilian flair about him, and yeah, definitely one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I think we maybe touched on this last week, but a possibility that he could be seen as a bit of a number 10 for Chelsea as opposed to a winger as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's played there for Palace a few times, and not quite sure, so don't quote me on it, but maybe at Reading too. But it definitely looks like he definitely fits the profile of what Chelsea wants, someone who can do both. And I guess they wanted one anyway, but I guess with Nkunku being out for so long, it's kind of made it even more desperate, I suppose. They haven't got too many options in the number 10 right now, and I know he didn't play it on Sunday, but Pochettino, you'd think, would go back to the 4-2-3-1 we've seen in pre-season. And then you've got not too many you can go there. You've obviously got Chukwuemeka, you've got Sterling, who's played there a bit for previous clubs, but there's just not too many in terms of number 10 with the likes of Mason Mount and Kai Havertz, even Christian Pulisic could play there, leaving this summer. So, yeah, definitely one where you could definitely see him in both roles in different games.
Yeah, and I guess quickly just to run through before we move on, there's still plenty of possible loan deals to come through as well. Harvey Vale, we're expecting to join Bristol Rovers. I think you were mentioning earlier, Joey Barton's already revealed that to his Twitter subscribers. Sorry, not Twitter.
Apparently,
yeah. So yeah, certainly a sign of the changing world. So want to keep an eye on there. There's obviously Lewis Hall's future still to be resolved. I think he was expected to join Palace, but maybe that's kind of lingering around in the background a little bit now. Obviously, futures of Romelu Lukaku, Hakim Ziyech still to resolve. Things still slow moving in that direction. Callum Hudson-Odoi. Yeah, any other transfers you want to touch on, Bobby?
Yeah, just a bit on Hudson-Odoi. It looks like Fulham for him. There's plenty of other clubs interested. I think Lazio have even expressed an interest, and Crystal Palace have been mentioned. Nottingham Forest sort of earlier in the window, but it looks like Hudson-Odoi is sort of set for Fulham. I guess it makes sense in terms of won't have to move house, being in West London and everything. So if he's already settled down, then he won't have to relocate or anything like that. Quite an exciting side for them, I think, where they got a good manager in Marco Silva. And I know they've been on the lookout for wingers. They obviously re-signed Willian this summer, and I think they've brought a few more in as well. So I think a good move for him. And, you know, he informed Chelsea that he wanted to leave earlier in the summer. And with a year left in his contract, I don't think Chelsea were ever going to hold him against that. I think it makes sense for both parties to part company now. But yeah, just crazy when you think of the sort of money we were talking about for Hudson-Odoi a few years ago. I think Chelsea rejected bids of like 60 to 70 million from Bayern Munich. And now it looks like he's going to leave for around between 10 and 15 million pounds a few years later. But I definitely still think there's a player there, and I'll be very if he does indeed move to Fulham, I'll be very keen to see how he does, and hopefully he can get a run of minutes in the side, because, like I said, I think there's potentially a really good player there.
Yeah, and I guess now 33 and a bit minutes into the podcast after that Liverpool game, maybe we touch on Chelsea versus Liverpool at the weekend. A 1-1 draw to kick off the season. A fairly entertaining game, to be fair, pretty back and forth, even if Chelsea did prevent Liverpool from having more than one shot on target. Liverpool probably started the game the better. They were kind of rampant in the early stages with their press, and Mohamed Salah's, quite frankly, outstanding pass to Luis Diaz put them in the lead. They obviously then had a goal disallowed for offside. Chelsea come back, and Axel Disasi on his debut gets that goal. We'll call it a poacher's finish in the box after Ben Chilwell's headed back in, and then Chelsea have a goal disallowed of their own. Ben Chilwell looking like a prime centre forward as he rounded out, and I think. And then I think Chelsea probably settled into the game a little bit the better. They dominated possession probably look the more comfortable of the side, maybe the more likely to win. But not a bad first outing of the season.
Yeah, no, I think there are so many positives for Chelsea to take. Yeah, like you said, I think Liverpool started the better, and they were always going to come out and press Chelsea. That, Pochettino would have known that for ages, and Chelsea probably did struggle. I think the three centre backs in particular sort of struggled at the start. I thought Colwill was having a hard time against Salah, which is no disgrace. I think Disasi had a couple of iffy moments, and but once obviously Liverpool scored, and like you said, it was a moment of magic from Salah. Then they had the one ruled out. Then the tide really turned. The game sort of changed then, I thought, and I think Disasi's goal was literally minutes after the disallowed Salah goal. And from then on, I thought Chelsea controlled the game really. Kept coming back for Liverpool. Like, it seemed like every ball Liverpool played, Chelsea would just come back. Chelsea would dispossess it, come back, and it would just be sort of wave after wave. And I think Liverpool just couldn't get to grips with Enzo Fernandez. Chelsea were just looking for him at every possibility they could, and Liverpool were trying to block off that ball to him. But I think the sort of role he played, the freedom he had, allowed him to move a lot more than usual probably, and get into positions where Liverpool couldn't stop him, and he was popping up all over the shop. And I think genuinely, I can't remember where I said this. I might have just said it to a mate, but I think it was one of the best solo midfield performances I've seen live at a game. It was that good. It might sound ridiculous to say, but I genuinely do think it was that good. Completely controlled the game. And I think the performance of Enzo Fernandez just set the tone for Chelsea, and that's why I think it's so exciting. What we were talking about earlier, Moises Caicedo coming in alongside him, I think it's just going to make him even better. And the way he wasn't doing like 40-yard passes. He kept doing like 20-yard passes, but every single time it would get Chelsea forward, and I honestly can't remember him misplacing the pass. But yeah, loads of positives to take. I thought obviously Fernandez, thought Nicholas Jackson did really well without getting a goal. It was weird. I thought like him against Kanate, there were times where Kanate looked like he had the better of him, and then vice versa. I think both of them did well against each other. I think it was a good battle. He had that one chance in the first half where maybe he should have scored and might have scored in pre-season. But yeah, I think there were definitely loads of positives to take. I thought Ben Chilwell did well. I thought the constant switch into him made like his positioning was causing Liverpool all sorts of trouble. He was definitely trying to get in behind Trent Alexander-Arnold. That was definitely a plan from Chelsea. But yeah, Conor Gallagher as well, I thought had a difficult opening 15, 20 minutes where Liverpool were, I guess, trying to take advantage of him being there and not being in his natural position, and trying to overload him almost with that sort of box midfield they have. But I thought once he grew into the game, he was really good and made a load of good interceptions. And I think the fact that I was writing an article about him that had to be out on full time, and I was saying I led with Conor Gallagher not being very good there, and then by the time full time came, I had to change it completely and said that he was really good. But yeah, so I think that says it all. But yeah, so loads of positives take from Chelsea.
Yeah, and I think you kind of mentioned that we saw a bit of a different shape from Chelsea in the game, which probably surprised many after pre-season. Pochettino in his press conference kind of, I don't know, he wasn't been funny, but he made the point that it was still a back four this time. It was no different to when his midfielder would drop in between the two central defenders to create the shape. And obviously, I guess the more we talk about football, the more we see about shape changes in different phases. But certainly interesting to see three central defenders start. I think, as you noted, it was interesting to see Colwill have to deal with Salah kind of pretty much alone early on. I thought he grew into the game. Thiago Silva, still a class act. I think I turned to you at Stamford Bridge and just kind of wondered how any of these young guys are actually going to, put in a performance where you say, now it's time to not play Thiago Silva anymore. So that is going to be really interesting to develop over the course of this season, because he will be turning 39. And then, as you said, Disasi looked pretty strong again. I think we both noted it as the teams were lining up that he is certainly a unit. As at 6'5" he is. It's bringing something to Chelsea's aerial presence in the box as well, and that could be worth a few goals over the course of this season. But yeah, I thought Ben Chilwell, you mentioned his kind of battle with Trent. I thought that was really interesting. He was, I guess, not a wing back as such. He was deemed a winger by Pochettino, and then almost a central midfielder to kind of quash Alexander-Arnold's development in the centre of the pitch as well. So that was a really interesting battle. And I guess we're just starting to get the hints that Pochettino is going to have his core principles. He's going to want his side to run a lot, to press a lot, to build from the back with, I guess, a base of three. But we're going to see lots of versatility in the play as well. I think another interesting combination we saw was Raheem Sterling and Reece James. They looked good down the right together. I think there's obviously going to be a lot of scrutiny over Raheem Sterling this season after he was signed to kind of be, for lack of a better phrase, the guy last year. So there's still going to be a lot of pressure on his shoulders. Showed some moments going forward, getting in the box, had a couple of deliveries that weren't converted. I guess, what did you make of that partnership down the right? And I guess, is Sterling done enough to, keep his chance for the next few games at least? With obviously there's Mudryk to come off the bench. Madueke was on the bench after kind of return to fitness. There's certainly some contenders there.
Yeah, I thought he did all right. It was interesting. If you asked me before the game, I thought that Chelsea would have been doubling up on Trent Alexander-Arnold being a sort of weaker defender than Andrew Robertson, but they seem to do it on the other side, and maybe that's something to do with Reece James's ability and what Pochettino has seen from Sterling and training or something. But I thought he did all right, Sterling, without being exceptional. Like you said, I think he had a few moments. There was one where he was did well to get inside the Liverpool box, whipped it across, and I think it was a dangerous cross, and Trent ended up heading it out for a corner. It's just sometimes I think it's his passing that frustrates me more than anything, because I think in his head he has the right, like his decision making is fine, but I think his lack of, don't really know the word, but like he just gives away the ball very often. His final ball is not very good, is what I'm trying to say, really. And it hasn't really been for Chelsea since he signed. But I still believe there's definitely a player in there. But of course there is. I mean, I've said it countless times on this show. I think you don't just drop off that much overnight. He was so good at Man City, and he was a constant starter under Pep Guardiola for years. You don't have that. You don't get that sort of status if you're not a world-class player. And I just think he needs confidence more than anything. I remember towards the end of last season, he got a double against Forest, I think it was, at home. And I thought maybe that's the time to kick on for him. But he didn't do so well the next game. And obviously it was sort of the end of the season, so it was hard to build any momentum. I just hope he does sooner rather than later, because otherwise you could see him being sold in next summer for sure, with his age, and Chelsea still trying to get a decent fee for him. Whether or not, I think he probably will keep his place for West Ham, because you've obviously got Noni Madueke, who's the only real other right winger. He hasn't played any football yet, none at all in pre-season, and he didn't come on the other day either. So I can't really see Pochettino starting him. Maybe, hopefully, he gets some minutes from the bench, so then he could be in contention for Luton the week after. But yeah, I think Sterling probably will keep his place. And sorry, there's a dog barking outside. I don't know if you can hear it.
Avid Raheem Sterling fan, I think.
Yeah, he's going absolutely mental. But yeah, I think he probably will keep his place against West Ham, but more to do with a lack of options there, really.
Yeah, and I guess we can maybe touch on that West Ham game now. Another Sunday at 4:30 game. I think coming into the season, we probably expected this Liverpool match to be a real big test, and then Chelsea have an opportunity to go on a run and really set themselves a platform. And if they don't perform, they put themselves under a great deal of pressure. West Ham is the only away game in the first few. They got Luton Town after that before facing FC Wimbledon in the Cup, which was drawn last week. And then obviously Nottingham Forest is the game that comes after the transfer window shuts, and then comes the international break before they return to face Bournemouth. So certainly some winnable games there. West Ham got their season underway this weekend with a draw against Bournemouth. I believe they led the game before Dominic Solanke of Chelsea and Liverpool interest, of course, scored a late equaliser in the 82nd minute. I think much like Chelsea's game against Liverpool, Chelsea will probably expect to dominate it. Bournemouth dominated possession against West Ham. I think West Ham only had about 37% possession. They, of course, have Declan Rice's hole in the centre of the field to fill. They have signed Edson Alvarez, who nearly joined Chelsea last summer. If Ajax had been more willing to do the deal at that stage, I think Souček and Paqueta played there last weekend. I guess what do you expect from that game? And I guess it's certainly an afternoon where Chelsea will be desperate to get 3 points to really kickstart the season.
Yeah, just a quick one. Has James Ward-Prowse signed yet?
I think he might have done, yeah. I think he might have.
I think that's a good signing, first and foremost. I think, Ward-Prowse will help without being the same player as Rice and even the same role. I think that will help in terms of having a leader there as well. Edson Alvarez is an interesting one. Like you said, he's been on Chelsea's radar for a while, and I think he actually went to West Ham this summer for less money than Chelsea offered last summer to Ajax, which seems a bit strange, but definitely one with potential. And I don't think he played at the weekend, did he? But he's you'd expect to get some sort of minutes against Chelsea. He's definitely a really strong, tall number 6 who will be hoping to limit Chelsea's attack. But I didn't watch any of West Ham Bournemouth, obviously, but it's really hard to sort of know what you're going to get at West Ham this season. They've sold a couple of good players, and I think only really recently they've made their first signing. I think maybe Alvarez was their first signing, and they were that one club who hadn't made any or whatever. But obviously losing Declan Rice is going to have an effect on any team. But I think, London, at a London stadium against West Ham, it's going to be a hard game. I don't think Chelsea have ever really had it too easy there. Fans will be right up for it as well, start of a new season. And I guess it's like a bit of a easy thing to say, really, but with like a lot of teams this season, you don't really know what you're going to get. And I think Chelsea can still fall under that bracket, really. So, yeah, an interesting one for sure, but one you'd like to think Chelsea would be confident of winning because of the sort of moments they produce. If they can play anything like they did in that, particularly that second half against Liverpool, then they should easily have too much for West Ham. But it's replicating that, and we all know how much Chelsea have struggled with being consistent over the seasons. I think that's one thing in particular that Pochettino needs to get across to his squad to keep those levels up, not get complacent against lower league teams or whatever. So it'd be a really interesting game. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I guess one question which I will, pin you down on. I'll have a second as well, but we'll start off with the team that Pochettino might pick. And I'm just wondering, looking at this back line, there's perhaps an expectation that we, see them return to 2 central defenders and maybe the base of 2 with the number 10 and then a front 3 again, maybe, or at least with 2 wingers. Who would you think would be that defensive partnership, or do you think that we will get 3 defenders again?
I think we'll go back to we'll see a 4-2-3-1 again. I think even though Pochettino didn't say it was a 3 at the back, I think it kind of was, to be honest. I think that was more to do with the opponent in Liverpool, almost trying to go man-to-man with their 3 attacking players. And again, sort of catch Liverpool by surprise, really. Like Klopp wouldn't have been expecting that on Sunday. So I think there's a lot of that. I don't think it's a long-term thing. Otherwise, I think we would have seen a lot more of it in America. We largely just saw the sort of 4-2-3-1 we expected from Pochettino during the preseason tour. So I do think it'll probably be that. Unfortunately for Axel Disasi, I think he drops out, even though he did impress and score, of course. But I do think Thiago Silva and Levi Colwill are going to be main two guys at the back this season. It's not to say Disasi won't get minutes because obviously injuries and etc. And obviously Thiago Silva being 38, almost 39, like you said, he's not going to start every game. So there's going to be opportunities for Disasi, but I do think he'll probably drop out this weekend. And Robert Sanchez in goal, of course. No one really else to go there. The two fullbacks, as you expect, Reece James and Ben Chilwell, and then Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez, which is really exciting to watch. And I think the three behind the striker is very interesting. I'd like to personally see Mikhailo Mudryk play, but who that's in place of, I'm not really sure. I think Chukwuemeka has a real good shout of going in at number 10. I think he did okay against Liverpool without properly excelling, I guess. Perhaps wanted a bit more from him, if I'm being a bit harsh, maybe. But he's one I really like, and I think in the number 10 role is something that could potentially work pretty well. And Raheem Sterling on the right, and then Nicholas Jackson up front. If you were to put me on the spot for a team, that's kind of what I'd like to see more than what I expect. Say what I expect, then perhaps not Mudryk starting, but yeah, at this point, who knows?
And unpredictable as it is, score prediction.
I mean
the game is nearly a week away, so I'll not hold you to it by Friday. But
yeah, I think Chelsea will win. I don't think it'll be easy. I think it'll be both teams score. Against Liverpool, there were a few moments where I thought Chelsea's defence looked very shaky, and that might have been down to Liverpool having world-class attackers in Salah and Diaz and Jota, but I can't really see this team going 90 minutes and keeping a clean sheet just yet. Obviously, Caicedo in might help that, offer more of protection, but I'm going to go 2-1 to Chelsea.
Yeah, that's the scoreline I had in my mind as well. I think what will help Chelsea...
You're going to have to say different now.
Well, I'll go 3-1 Chelsea, and I'll be confident. Nicholas Jackson hat-trick, why not?
Nicholas Jackson.
I do think a goal would be big for him, though. I thought he was really good last weekend, and just to really help that confidence flow, a goal wouldn't do any harm. But I think, much like the first game of uncertain midfields, it's probably going to be similar with West Ham, as we kind of talked about with Alvarez and Ward-Prowse coming into the team. Maybe there's a bit uncertainty over who could fill that midfield for West Ham, like there is a degree for Chelsea. They've got a week to work on it, of course, but I think that's where a team might have had a benefit against Chelsea as they still try to kind of work that midfield area out, even though they probably have a good idea of what they want from it now, and West Ham don't really have that advantage. So hopefully that works in Chelsea's favour, and Chelsea have a little bit better time than they did last time at the London Stadium, where it was a bit of a tense game after João Felix's first goal. But I guess we'll end things there. We'll be back again next week, but until then, we'll have all the latest transfer news on Football.London throughout this week, and all the action from the London Stadium this weekend too. And of course, Mauricio Pochettino's press conference on Friday. So yeah, please do leave us a review. Make sure you subscribe, and we'll speak again next week. Thank you for joining us.